Pizza people, welcome back. Hollywood Pizza here, and I'm joined by Hamhawks42, and we've got another episode of the Cold Pizza Podcast. So today we're actually going to be talking about some more news from MTG that was pretty big. Happened a couple days ago on Monday. Before it happened, we kind of already had some leaks about it. So before we get into it, Hamhawks, how you doing today, homie?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Yeah, it's late as we record this, but I gotta say this is we're gonna be touching on some topics that I'm very excited about. And whenever bands shake up formats, there's always discussion to be had. Whether it's a good thing, whether it's a bad thing, we'll get into it. But it's one of those that the moment this news dropped, I'm sure all of us content creators were like, "Oh, okay, we're in. We got to do this thing," and yeah, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to talking with you about it.
Definitely. So yeah, there was some bans, some shakeups in two specific formats. The first one being standard, where the Meathook Massacre was banned. The second one being modern, where Yoren was banned. A card that most people who play Arena are definitely familiar with. In terms of like standards of past, you still see it in Explorer, probably some historics. I mean, you definitely see it around. Obviously in standard you don't see it because it's just rotated out, but in modern, for the last few months, it pretty much had been like a powerhouse. I even remember last year when I stopped playing modern, it felt like Yoren was already kind of like too much, and I'm actually surprised it took this long to get banned. I thought I was gonna get banned with Luris,
Mm-hmm.
considering that it
That
was a
would have made sense.
companion. I knew that when Luris got banned, Yoren was gonna be the next thing on the block, and here we are a few months later, Yoren getting banned. So the reason for Yoren was kind of weird. They pretty much said like shuffling dexterity or dexterity, where it's like 80
Yeah,
cards
it was pretty silly if
for
you ask
your
me,
Yoren
but yeah,
builds.
it was like cumbersome to operate. I think was the way they phrased it, as if
Yeah,
like modern players with their tiny hands struggle with 80 card decks. Meanwhile, commander players who have 99 card decks that they tutor through all day and they don't have a problem. But modern players, oh no, 80 cards. Whatever shall we do?
yeah. I
It that
I don't
that
know.
struck that reasoning rung hollow to me. It seemed kind of silly, but
Yeah,
it is what it is.
what's your opinion on what you actually think the reason for them
Yeah.
doing it?
I think the main reason for that is modern cards are expensive. Modern cards are expensive, and if you have to get 20 more of them to flesh a deck out, it's going to the cost of a modern deck is suddenly. I mean, we're in a situation. There was a time in the not too distant past where I'm on the outside looking in with modern. I am, but there was a time when I was looking at decks like Burn or Storm, where it's like, okay, I could get my hands on a modern deck that would be okay. That like okay, it'll be able to play, maybe have some fun, put up a couple wins, maybe not set the world on fire, but
Good at
do
F and
okay.
M, can maybe help you
Yeah,
at a
exactly. Go to
GP,
F and
but
M,
not
maybe.
take down.
Yeah,
You
like
know,
yeah, hang, maybe exactly. Like have some fun, have a good night out at an F and maybe get some prizes. Like 500-600 bucks. That was reasonable. But if you really wanted to, like, oh, the pinnacle, like the top and like the Cadillac of modern was Jund. If you could get your hands on Jund, which let's be honest was more my play style anyway. Like you put green and black together, I'm in. Like I don't like I always have been. I don't know why. There's just something about that color combo. It just makes me happy. Um, and so like Jund was like the top dog, best in show, like the pinnacle of luxury when it came to modern at around $1,200,
yeah, that was
maybe
already a
30.
lot. I mean,
That's a lot of money,
a car payment and or a car on Craigslist. How we used to
right?
make the
Exactly.
joke. It's like, well,
Yeah,
I could get a modern deck, or I could just get a car on Craigslist and
yeah, 100%.
maybe
That
like
was
fix it
that
up
was
the
where
next
you.
paycheck and actually be able to sell it for some money,
Yep,
compared to
exactly.
a Magic deck that. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, maybe you could sell it for like 65 to 70% of the value, but you
Sure.
and me both know it's already kind of hard to sell cards for what they're
Oh,
actually
totally.
worth most of the time?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, selling cards is tough. And so that was like the pinnacle, like 1,200 bucks, maybe 13. But like that was like the big spender, you know, that was like, anyway. Nowadays, with Yori on decks in the format, you're looking at over $2,000 to get your hands on the Yorion Omnath deck. I've heard that referred to as the money pile deck, where the whole like
You
all of a
just need all the
sudden shunned.
lands. You literally need almost all the staples of the format
Mm-hmm.
in like one
All of them.
place, you know?
Yeah,
Rens,
you need your Ragavans. You need
Teferis,
all the like what are the elementals?
yeah, the elementals,
All the elementals. You got to have Omnath in there, of course. You
Omnath,
got
yep.
like the amount of stuff, and of course all your fetches. Can't forget the fetches.
Yeah,
Like
so I'm saying like your mana base
yeah,
alone is like $1,000. So like your half of your deck is your lands, and then the other half is
mhm.
the other cards, and yeah, it's just
So
too expensive. Like
yeah.
it's just there's a
At the
lot
end
of
of the day,
reasons for it to be banned. It's like the power level.
yeah.
Uh, okay, if we really want to take theirs seriously, it's your dexterity, whatever. And then on top of that, the price of an average like the barrier of entry into a format where your best deck is $2,000 means that
Hmm.
it's kind of gonna not make people want to come in because what are people willing to pay if they're just gonna lose
Hmm.
to this every time they face it, right?
Exactly.
Like let's be
Yeah.
honest here, right? Like that's kind of what it comes down to is like what investment does anybody want to make on any of these modern sets? And WotC wants to keep making modern masters or whatever it's called now, modern horizon sets
The Horizons. Yeah.
where all these influx of cards come in, they rotate some of these older decks out, and then you're forced to have to buy them. They'd rather do that, and
Hmm.
who knows, maybe they're going to announce that soon. But I'm just saying, um, they'd rather have people want to buy into the format than not. And I think you're right, Yorian,
Yeah.
and
Yorion
having
priced
80
people out of the
card
format.
decks, yeah, where you need to be playing like 36 to 40 lands or whatever
Hmm.
they're
Yeah.
planning.
If
It's like fetch
it.
lands, and you're right. Like I think
Yeah.
the in terms of dexterity, what it really comes down to is this is getting like the Sensei's Divining Top treatment, where
Hmm.
essentially like if you're shuffling in a commander game, it makes sense because you're all playing for fun, and the game could take hours. Let's be honest here, the game could be
Hmm.
a couple hours,
Totally.
3 hours, whatever. But in a competitive setting, if someone's shuffling their 80 card deck continuously, and then you're also trying to make sure they're not cheating, quote unquote, and then you have to shuffle it and cut it and do all this other nonsense, then it is essentially cutting into the time that everyone takes to finish a match. So I definitely understand that, especially considering that on top of that, these decks, when they play against each other in the mirror match, it's just like, automatically going
Hmm.
to go to time. So, um, yeah, I think all that stuff definitely makes sense. Maybe not like the shuffling and stuff, but it is the fact that, yeah, your fetch lands and everything else. I mean, there's people who shuffle really slow, and it makes sense. It's just like Sensei Divine Top, where someone has literally been looking at the top three for every 1 minute that they have at the end of every single turn, even though they know what the
Hmm.
literal top three cards are, and it's just absurd. It's just like, all right, like, stop doing this. You're wasting everyone's time. Like,
Right.
they want to take that out of a tournament setting, and it's just
Hmm.
crazy. It's crazy how you can name like 6 or 7 different reasons for this banning. Like
Yeah.
companions already is like a reason, right?
Yeah, totally. But the other thing I find really funny is the reason that people run 80 cards in the Orient deck is because they get a free 4/5 that does allow like re-trigger some ETBs, which is good, of course. Of course it's good.
Like
Anytime you
Omnath
get access
and
to
the
additional cards, it's going to be good.
elementals.
This thing also has a good stat line that also feeds into your deck strategy, so of course it makes a lot of sense. So yes, taking Yorion out is um a notable downgrade to that deck, even if they don't change anything else about it. If a person has an 80 card deck and they almost never brought Yorion to hand anyway, there's no reason. There's nothing in the rules that says they cannot roll up to a modern tournament
Yeah,
with
they
an
didn't
80
even
card
ban
deck.
any cards that are like four of in the deck. They just
Nope,
banned the
just companion.
companion. So they're trying to like make people play less cards, but in reality, it's like, well, who cares? I mean, you can still just
Who
play your
cares?
80 card deck and
Yeah.
not
If
give,
your 80 card deck really works
you
well at
know.
80 cards, just keep it there. Like that's
Yeah, like
fine.
why would you even want to
Like
make a change now, right? Like it
the
doesn't even
the
make any sense.
the idea is, I mean, like the idea that we all know is like, okay, if you have fewer cards, the likelihood of your drawing a specific card goes up. Therefore, theoretically, if you have a leaner deck, you're more likely to get to the meat of your
Come
strategy.
on, man, it's Magic. We all know they always have it, Ham. Come
They
on,
always
man. They
do,
always have it. Come on now. We all know they always have it. They always have the
dude.
Omnath on turn
Yeah.
4, on time, with the
Hmm.
backup elementals and all this other nonsense. And
Yeah,
they
there are
got it.
certain
Like
cards. There are certain cards that will always be there on time. On
they're
Omnath is
like Ren
absolutely one
Ren
of them.
into Teferi into Omnath into you lose the game. Like that's
Yeah,
just
there's something about it when you're like you don't even need to try to like you don't have to stack your deck at all. It stacks itself. I don't know how they
yeah,
do it,
it's
but
just MT.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's MTG. Um,
Anyway,
but in all seriousness, yeah,
tongues in cheek a little bit. Yeah.
there's like 10 different reasons Yoren could be banned, and
Hmm.
um, yeah, I mean, companions are definitely a mistake, which is going to be, I
Totally.
think, a conversation for later that we're going to have here on the cast.
Absolutely.
So
Sounds
the
good.
next card that got banned, quite a popular one, the big shebang here, that everyone was waiting for. So everyone was like, "Oh, Fable the Mirror Breaker is gonna get it." You know, it's the definitive card. Or some people were saying some stuff in black decks like Invoke, and the card that
Hmm.
ends up getting it is a card from the black decks, and it's actually Meathook Massacre. So, Meathook, as we all know it to be, potentially one of the best sweepers ever printed. Um, it's just really, really powerful. Tons of upside. It's a mythic rare for a reason.
Hmm.
Um, and this card's existence has essentially made aggro be non-existent because the mid-range decks, even though they're really powerful, they do take some time to set up. So what ends up happening is you can just be all cool and be like, yeah, I got my Kumanos down into my bloodthirsty adversaries and my storm seekers and all my stuff and just going off, your Raijus and your Raijus, your Kaijus, your Smijus, whatever. And then all of a sudden, they just me hook and the game ends because that's all your cards, and then your opponent goes back up to like 17, and
Hmm.
that's it. And then
Yeah.
they start going off with their corpse connoisseurs, their fables, and start outvaluing you. And they already were doing that, but if they had some pressure before, then it wouldn't have been so bad. But
Hmm.
um, there's a lot of different cards that could have been banned, in my personal opinion. I said that it was probably going to be Fable. Most of the reason. So what I consider the first thing is that we only went 3 or 4 weeks without a ban in standard, or a month, right, Ham? It was a month and a
Yeah, it was
day.
about almost exactly a month. Yep.
Yeah, a month and a day. Without any bans in standard. It'd been like 3 or 4 years since that had happened. So unfortunately, we're back at it again. Card already being banned. Now, the main thing about this is that there is a bunch of different choices. And what I personally find about bans like this that take place before a new set's about to come out, in the same vein of like all runs, in the same vein of like standard 2021 or standard 2022, whatever that one niche format was for a little
Hmm.
bit.
Yeah, San Antonio 22. Yeah.
So what it really ends up being is like a soft rotation.
Hmm.
I'm really surprised they didn't ban Fable, because by banning Fable, you essentially do make a completely new format. Decks are kind of built differently, and
Hmm.
everything feels a little bit more fair, and a lot of the 3-for-1 cards are a lot more balanced, because the best 3-for-1 card is always going to be like Fable while it's still around.
Hmm.
It's just, I mean, it's like a 5-for-1, 6-for-1, whatever you even want to call it. I mean, a card just
Right.
does so many things. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm fine with Meathook. I think there should have been some other cards if we were going to ban Meathook personally. If we're really going to go down that route. But at the
Hmm.
same time, I think that with Meathook being banned, it's a new avenue for creature decks and rush decks, and I mean inevitability. So the main thing about the black deck is that it can hit you with like an invoke, right? And you're
Hmm.
like, oh, that's bad, but you can kind of rebuild your board. But then the problem is that if you rebuild your board, a massacre is going to come down, and if they got like a planeswalker out, then you're definitely screwed. But now, I mean, they don't have the massacre, so even if you get hit with an invoke, it's not as bad because you're still going to have some board probably, and you can rebuild your board. And now they have to just have removal spells or down tech the Lilianas and stuff. And I mean, I think that's fair because now you can kind of attrition them back to a certain
Hmm.
degree. I don't know, it's weird. I think it's a good banning. I think that other cards probably could have been banned with it. Fable, among them. I think that maybe
Hmm.
even, I don't know. There's probably another card that they could have banned with this too, and I could have seen it. I'm not sure what, off the top of my
Yeah.
head, honestly, right? But I mean, something um, up there. I
Yeah.
mean,
No, they're out there.
Wandering Emperor is a card
Yeah.
that could potentially be on the watch list because it's a card um, that card's like nuts. That card is just
Yeah.
nuts. Like, let's be
True.
honest here. That card is like
Wandering
nuts.
Emperor is fantastic, but I got to be honest. There are at least three black cards I would name over Wandering Emperor.
Like Invoke
Honestly.
Liliana,
Yep. I mean,
and
Liliana's not going anywhere.
Graveyard
They just printed
Trespasser.
her. But yeah, Graveyard Trespasser
Graveyard
and Invoke.
Trespasser's up there. It's
Invoke Despair and Graveyard Trespasser. Those cards are cracked in half.
yeah.
And like, and on top of that, like they're not doing anything that is particularly synergistic. Like they're not any kind of like fun build around. They're just going to kill you because they're better cards than what you have in your deck. Like that's just how they operate. Now
They're like 3 or
Invoke
4 for
Despair,
ones. And they're all
yeah,
3 for ones.
there's
They're
3 or
just all
4
like
for
3
ones.
for ones. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, there's massive value cards. Now,
Like,
Invoke Despair is
crazy.
a really interesting case, I think, because it does have the 4 black pips. You need to be in like a mono black kind of situation, or like if you're in a 2-color or 3-color deck, you need to have a lot of fixing or treasure tokens or something that can reliably produce 4 black mana. So it's tricky to cast in multicolor situations, which is relevant. But in mono black, you have a situation where for 5 mana, you do get a straight 3-for-1 regardless of what kind of board state they have. And right now, that card is especially powerful, and this is true of Liliana as well. The card is especially powerful because the kind of decks that seem to be working a lot of the time only have 1 creature, 1 enchantment, or 1 planeswalker at a time.
Yep.
So when Invoke Despair hits, you're getting a huge hit on the creature, the enchantment, or the planeswalker. And then if they don't have any of those, you're just doming them and drawing cards. Now, if aggro is allowed to survive in the meta, if I'm in a mono white or like a red rush situation, like let's say I'm just dumping goblins. I'm just gonna, for the sake, I don't know that a good goblin deck could exist in standard at the moment, but let's just assume, there's some good goblins coming in Brothers War or something. I don't know, but I'm just dumping a bunch of goblins on the board. I have 3 or 4 tiny goblins on the board. You hit me with an Invoke Despair. I gotta be honest, I don't care. I'm gonna sacrifice some little 1/1 turd I don't care about. I'm gonna take 4 to the face, and you're gonna draw 2
tapping
cards.
out. Like your whole turn's
You're
gone.
tapped out, and I'm gonna kill you before you get a chance to use those cards. And the fact that I just took 4, I don't care because I'm the one dealing the damage to you. So whatever. Like, so Invoke does very little against aggro. Meanwhile, Meathook completely destroys aggro, like we said. So I think getting Meathook out of the format gives aggro the best chance that it has to be a good counter to some of these mono black decks that we're seeing, which, by the way, I classify as mid-range decks. One thing that I found really funny,
100%.
yeah, I think of it as a mid-range deck. But one thing that I found really funny, we're recording this a couple of days after having a standard tournament, actually, on the PizzaBox, which was a gas. Not gonna lie, it was great. But there were a number of people who registered the mono black deck on MTGmelee, which is the system that we use on the back end, and I noticed a lot of people had mono black control listed. Other people had mono black mid range. Other people had mono black aggro. I looked at all of those lists. They were almost identical. Because the truth is,
it's everywhere. That deck can do everything. That deck can do everything.
It does it all.
Yeah, it did it
and
all.
like, yeah, the aggro variants might have had 4 evolved sleeper, whereas the control variants might have only had 2 or something. Like the proportions varied, but they were all working with the same tools.
That deck was so insane, man. Like to think that
bonkers,
that deck existed here for the first few weeks. Like think about it. Like every time we're all playing aggro or mid range sometimes, because mid range can play sweepers, but every time we're playing aggro, it's always like, man, I just need to have a sweeper. And in the black decks, it was like, oh, I just me hook, and then now I just gain life, and my opponent takes a couple here because I had 2 creatures too. But then now I'm back in the game. I get to start playing my other cards that are like 3-for-1s, and that deck was literally everything. Imagine a black deck that just does it all, like just everything.
Or I've actually tried to play in more aggressive strategies against black decks running Sheoldred and Meathook Massacre. Sheoldred's got a big old booty on her. With 5 toughness, she survives most Meathooks. While your
and it's going to kill opposing gluttons and everything too.
It's over.
Yep.
It's just straight up. And yeah, exactly. The Graveyard Glutton's flipped over. It's a 4/4. Like, yeah, exactly. There's so many situations where the black deck can just completely destroy what you're doing with minimal damage to what they're doing with Meathooks because of the flexibility it gives you. So yeah, it's huge. It's absolutely huge.
Shielded, man,
so
like,
just on the record, I am pro the Meathook ban. I think it is a good thing. However, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on the meta itself. My hope is that some aggro deck steps up and shakes things up, because that's what it would take. The goal of this, ban is to shake up the format. That's what we ultimately want to see.
We need all the mono decks to come back.
Yeah. Let's get mono white back in here. Let's get mono black in. Now, interestingly enough, prior to rotation, the main deck on the ladder anyway, especially at best of one for like the last month or two, was Boros aggro, and Meathook Massacre was around during that time.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I found really interesting about that is the Boros aggro list had things like Thalia. It had action like Redain was in some lists. You also had Elite Spellbinder that could really. Elite Spellbinder was clutch
Yeah,
at
Spellbinder's really
disrupting board
good.
wipes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like the deck was capable if if the spellbinder could hit you and get the meat hook out of your hand and tax. The moment you have to pay 2 extra for meat hook, you might as well not have it. It's not gonna do what you want. And in that matchup, it's gonna be over before you have the mana to get a good hit off of it in most games. So I found that very interesting. You know, because as we were, as I was kind of noodling on this band, I was like, wait a minute, aggro was great, but now it's not. And the card that we're blaming on keeping aggro down was around back then. So I find that all very interesting. But at the end of the day, in our current environment, Meathook I think is the biggest culprit for preventing aggro from popping off. Aggro did lose a lot of tools, to be fair.
Creature lands. Without the
Yeah,
creature
the creature
lands,
lands were massive.
Meathook
Yeah.
Massacre is too strong because you can at least
Mm-hmm.
have some follow up, some game plan. But the problem is that without a follow up, without a game plan, Meathook Massacre kind of just shines, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just so crazy. Like this kind of leads into like one of our other main topics, and specifically too that we touched a little bit on in Modern earlier, when we talk about the Yoren ban, and for me
Mm-hmm.
it's power creep. Like the
Yep.
thing about power creep is that it's no longer 2 mana 5/5s or like Buster, right? Because they could print a 2 mana 5/5 no ability, and we wouldn't even care because we would just be like, yeah, whatever. It just dies to March. 3 mana,
Right.
you just exile it, or one white and exile another card and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally, right? Like, isn't that kind of absurd to think
Yeah.
about? Like,
Well, Champion of the
it's
Perished exists right now, and that effectively in a zombie deck can become a five
huge.
five six six for one, and it grows throughout the course of the game. Unplayable.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean, and then the card that's being banned, the 2 cards that are being banned are mid-range cards. Like,
mm-hmm.
it's crazy to think that some of the most busted stuff that used to get banned was, combo decks that comboed off too fast, or I don't know, maybe some creatures that were like a little bit too out of control. Like, and now, yeah, Yoren's is out of control. Don't get me wrong, but like that and Mihawk are essentially like mid-range cards. Like, think about
Mm-hmm.
how far we've gotten in terms of power creep, where companions is pretty much like one of the most busted things, right? Like they printed that, and that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
led down like this huge slippery slope of bannings and on just bad format feelings. Like, and then
Right.
now we have in standard a board wipe 3 weeks, a month, whatever, into new standard, and we're already having a card that all it's doing is just wiping the board, but because of its like because it has like 2 or 3 other abilities essentially on it, like that's what ends up making it crazy, right? Like
Yeah.
it's crazy. Like Magic is so different now. Like we talked about Graveyard Trespasser. Like Graveyard Trespasser is just a 3 mana 3/3. Yeah, but I
Mm-hmm.
mean it also pings. It eats the graveyard, so it's gonna hurt certain strategies. And then if you just pass the turn, either one of you end up passing the turn, it flips over into a 4/4. Then now it's eating like 2 cards and dealing 2 additional damage. And if the game's getting
And
grindy, then it's a card that just takes over. And then on top of that, it
yeah,
takes another card. It takes 2 cards to target it
it's got that
in
damn
order for it
ward.
to
Yeah,
die.
exactly.
Yeah, like it's a reality smasher.
Mm-hmm.
Reality
Dude's nuts, man.
Smasher was like really insane in Modern because it was always a 2-for-1. In order for you to target it with your Path to Exile, it's going to be a 3-for-1 because yeah, you can path it, but you got to discard a card, and then on top of that, I'm going to get a land. So
Mm.
yeah, it's like a 3-for-1, and then you feel pretty good, and then you can cast your other stuff. But like, I don't know, it's weird to think that that's what power creep is today. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
just all a bunch of like cards that are like 3-for-1s, 4-for-1s, and Mihawk and Yoren are the most egregious cards ever because Yoren's like an X for one. Like Yoren, if
Mm-hmm.
you have, yeah, even like bare minimum, an Omnath and one Elemental down, and you cast Yoren, heaven forbid you even have a Planeswalker you get to reset the loyalty of.
Oh my goodness.
Like, you're getting all this value, and then the Elemental and the Omnath comes in, you draw a card, the Elemental triggers, it kills some stuff, like, or if it's Fury, it kills like 3 or 4 things. Like, I don't know, and me Hook's like kind of like that too, where it's like, all right, I just spent my first 4 turns making a bunch of 2/2s, and then they me Hook and they gain like 4 or 5 life, and now you're down to two
Yeah.
cards, and they still have like 4 or 5, and then they start playing other cards that draw them cards, or then they play like the Trespasser, and yeah, it's weird. Like Magic's so different now. Like the cards all do like so many things. Like even Corpse Connoisseur almost feels like a rare.
Yeah. If that had been printed to rare, I wouldn't be mad. There are a lot of rares in recent sets that can't compare to that card's abilities. And I think that the thing that a lot of people are the thing that is easy to overlook is like card efficiency and card advantage. Because if you look at the cards that keep bubbling to the top that people keep playing in the current standard environment, you got Reckoner Bankbuster, Invoke Despair, you have your Meat Hook Massacres, you've got Wedding Announcement, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Graveyard Trespasser, like you're saying. These are, and just a ton of Planeswalkers that do all kinds of good stuff. These are
Mm-hmm.
all cards that give you multiple cards worth of value, and in some cases literally give you additional cards, and like those are the cards that work. Like Evelyn the Covetous is another great example that saw play in a recent set championship. This is a 3-color 2/5 vampire tribal card. I looked at that and like, that is commander through and through. There is no way that anyone is going to be playing that in a competitive standard event. I was dead wrong. There were
just it's just
multiple.
Vampire Gonti,
It's
right?
Vampire Gonti,
It's just
exactly, and
Vampire
it's
Gonti.
flash. 2/5 for 5 at flash
No
speed,
Death Touch
worth it.
either. Ugh.
And it draws you multiple cards.
Yeah, it does
And
a lot
because
though.
they're like, yeah, it's just, it's worth it because it gets you those additional cards. Like, additional cards are worth it. They just are.
Yeah, like you being able to do like 3 or 4 things is like
Mm-hmm.
what Magic is today. Like Omnath was the beginning. Well, Uro and I mean
Mm-hmm.
Oko. I mean, how many cards we had now that kind of signified where it was like, hey, this is where Magic's going, right? And yeah, if it's
Right.
not an Omnath, it's like not even worth it nowadays because that's Fable is
No.
like a turn 3 Omnath. It does
Pretty
the same
much.
thing. It draws a card.
Mm-hmm.
The card
Draws a card
essentially
that ramps you,
gets
puts a 2/2
generated
on the
onto the
body.
battlefield. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then it ramps you, which generates mana.
That that's the
Ugh,
thing.
card
Every
filters
single
and
mode,
ugh.
every single mode on Fable of the Mirror Breaker is almost a playable card at two and a red. You give me a Goblin Shaman for 2 and a red, 2/2 when it attacks. I'll create a treasure
There's a
token.
legendary, the legendary Captain Lannister, Lannery or whatever.
Oh, Captain Land Storm. Yeah, I
Um,
think they have a couple other stuff going, a couple other things going on. But you're right.
mm-hmm.
That, yeah, very similar.
I read that the other day because I was we talked about Ixalan and I was looking at Ixalan cards and I was like, wow, I was like, imagine like back in the day, a legendary
Mm-hmm.
had to, that was the downside, and it made a treasure, and then it gets buffed if you sack a treasure or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and it's
Yeah,
just so funny how far we've come. Like in
so
Magic,
funny,
like
man.
cards have to do like, yeah, they have to do like 3 or 4 things. I think that's essentially what's led to this banning is
Yeah,
that there's too much going on. And at the same time, this banning means that there's going to be more going on because, yeah, the games are going to be grindy. Without there being like a Mihawk to kind of cap off the game,
mm-hmm.
um, games are going to be really grindy, and it's going to be a lot of things on the battlefield, going the time even
Yeah,
more. Like I think it's going to be
yeah.
interesting. I think you're right in the same sense that there's going to be a change, but it's not going to be like the big change that we all want
Yeah.
it to be. But I'm expecting. I don't think this is going to be the first ban. If we're already banning a month in,
No.
I expect another ban after Brothers War comes out.
There's no way
For
Fable
some
of the
stuff
Mirror
probably.
Breaker
Yeah.
There's no way Fable of the Mirror Breaker rotates out unscathed next year. No way. That card is
It's gonna be nuts if
if
it does.
let me tell you what. If there are cards in Brothers War and other upcoming sets that Wizards believe will reasonably counter Fable the Mirror Breaker or compete with it with the amount of value they generate, yikes. Like, if that's going to be the new standard moving forward, it is not going to be fun.
Yeah, speaking of
Everybody,
power creep,
just
that's actually a really good way to put it, is that like the main problem that we're running into, so like I get it, like standard hasn't always been play whatever you want type situation, but it really could be. And I think that even if there's like four decks, it's four of the best decks in the format, I think that's probably fine, because at least that's still enough variety plus all the other stuff underneath it. But like, I don't know, I just feel like the main problem nowadays is that whenever a new set comes out, it's essentially almost rotating everything that's already in,
sometimes,
because of
yeah,
how powerful it is.
yeah.
um Kamigawa was like that.
hmm
Streets of New Capenna was like that, and to a certain degree, obviously, Diamond Air United
Yeah, and
has been like
standard
that
is
as
a
well. You know.
standard is a small card pool, so if any format is going to be taking that kind of if any format is going to behave that way, I'd rather it be standard than other formats. Unlike what we see with Modern Horizons in Modern, like
Yeah,
one
spend like
set
$1,000 on a
rotating
deck.
all of
Yeah.
Modern, that's messed up. Straight up, that's absurd, but we've seen it happen in standard. But you're right, we do have these kind of like mini rotations because the new cards are so much stronger than the old ones. And the thing that I see a lot is when a new set drops, it's either one of two things. Either all the old cards are completely obsolete. You might as well just forget about them and just focus on the new ones. Except like three of like the old ones that still hold up. Or two or three from your old decks. Or the new set really just brings 4 or 5 cards of note, and the rest is just for people playing draft. There doesn't really seem to be a middle ground. And I feel like things need to be more balanced. And like that's something that I've actually been harping on a lot about. That's part of and I think the biggest issue when it comes to just power creep on the whole is when you crank the dial up to 11, when everything is at its max volume, everything is speeding down the freeway as fast as it possibly can. Every little mistake becomes so much more visible, painful, or devastating. If you're driving at 25 miles an hour down a residential road and you kind of lose sight of where you're going a little bit and swerve for a second, okay, you look like a little bit of a jackass. You might get pulled over. Like worst case scenario, you hit a parked car and you have some nasty insurance stuff to deal with. You're fine. Not fun, bad times. However, like pay attention while you drive. Don't text and drive, kids. But like if you're flying down a freeway at like 120 that you shouldn't be and you swerve a little bit, you're probably not getting out of that. It's a very different situation. So when Wizards prints an overpowered card that is the best thing by a mile into an environment where everything else is already going to kill you by turn 4. The moment they print that, then all of a sudden the game is effectively over on turns 2 or 3. Is anybody having any fun anymore?
Yeah,
No.
and I mean, you kind of make a good point, because in my personal opinion, it's been like this for a long time. I think that
Mm-hmm.
there was a while where everything was pretty balanced. So I want to talk about like specifically Wild Mongrel. So
Okay.
you had a time period back in the day, Odyssey block for all you youngins in the house. Back in the day, a lot of what Magic was based around was like what the best 2 drops were. You had like cards like Wild Mongrel, Goblin Pile Drivers, and then you started to see cards like Tarmogoyf, Stoneforge Mystics, things like that. Now, in the same vein, a lot of these cards were good in their standard and were good in eternal formats. For standard specifically, what I find interesting is that at one point it ended up being turn 4.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever your turn 4 play or whatever your 4 drop is is essentially gonna win the game. And standard, it was pretty much like Meathook, right? Like you play Meathook on 4,
Mhm.
and you pretty much wipe everything out of the battlefield. There's other 4 drops too, I think, in standard that kind of have that
Yeah.
feeling. I honestly can't name
Well,
them right now besides Wandering Emperor. I think
yeah,
that
Wandering Emperor Sheoldred is another one. It's
what
like you
yeah,
drop it, they
Shieldred's the
have the
another one.
answer, or it's over. Yep.
Yeah, so you have only those 2 cards specifically, I think, in the 4 drop right now. I think
A lot of
what's
them are the 3.
happened, yeah, here, yep,
Yep.
exactly,
Sorry.
yep.
Oh, sorry if I
No,
got
no,
ahead of you there.
that's the point. The point is that a lot of them are on 3. You have Fable, you have Rafine, Wedding Announcement, you have right. I mean, you could Graveyard
Hmm.
Trespasser.
Oh yeah, 100.
You can name all these different cards at 3 mana, and I think that that's actually what the problem is in Standard is that they've almost accelerated because and we're not even saying that the game ends on turn 3. What we're saying is that
No.
your opponent plays this card or you play this card that gives you so much value up front that it almost doesn't even matter what your opponent does because you got to do it first. And because you got to do it first means that like your opponent will be behind for like the rest of the game.
Hmm.
And then if they finally do catch up, it'll be like way later in the game and it would have had to have taken probably like lots of resources to even get there. But I think that that is the problem. I think that right now we're turning into like a turn 3 format. And not even in a. It used to be like, yeah, I play some goblins, yeah, double pile driver with war chief prospectors, and you're just dead, and all this other nonsense. But nowadays, it's more like you just play Rafine, and then you already have a couple things laying around, and all of a sudden you're cycling through your deck for the best cards, and then you follow that up with like a one of the better 4 drops, like we talked about, Wandering Emperor, and
Hmm.
then before you know it, the gates are closed. You can't
Yeah.
win that game anymore. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
game's over. Like you're so
100%.
behind, like so behind.
And because these powerhouse game-ending 3 drops, and in some case 4 drops, do exist in standard, there's a whole world of really cool cards that exist out there that are just not an option. You
Mm-hmm.
just can't play them. You don't have a choice. One that I want to bring up, mostly because when I say card names out loud, it forces Hollywood to actually go grab the image, and I like that. Make them do a little editing in post. But anyway, Garner, Bloodfist of Keld, is a uncommon that was printed in Dominaria United, and most of you probably, unless you've been playing Draft, have no clue who the hell I'm talking about because she doesn't see any play. She is a 4/3 human berserker for 1 black, red, red. Whenever another creature you control dies, draw a card if it was attacking. Otherwise, Garner Bloodfist of Keld deals 1 damage to each opponent. This is a card that a lot of people in my chat and that I've talked to have encouraged me to put in decks. I refuse to for one very simple reason. It is a 3 toughness 4-drop.
It ain't Shieldred.
There is a 0% chance that is going to survive long enough to have any impact on the board. Even if I'm attacking on the very first turn and I have some kind of sack outlet that I could even draw a card, it's not going to be worth it. Like, the best case scenario on this card is like a really crappy Deadly Dispute. It's like half of Village Rites. It's awful. This card is terrible because it is just not the best. I want this is a great example of a card that I wish had a shot. Maybe not to be the best thing, maybe not to be top tier meta, but I want to be able to put it into an aggressive Rakdos deck and to not look like a dumbass. Yeah, and honestly, like it's one of those things. Like
Yeah, it's rough, man.
running a card like this makes you look like a straight up fool because all of the removal can deal with it because the removal is the removal that people are actually running are designed to deal with way bigger, scarier threats than this. And on top of that, like it's a 4-drop setup on a substandard body. That like there was a time when you could get away with that. That's just not the case anymore.
Yeah, your 3 and 4 drops are the game enders. Like you play those
Yeah.
as your value
Yeah.
engines. You don't even need to go higher into the curve. And then your 1s and 2 drops. I mean, whoo, almighty! Like what? Well, 1s and 2 drops are just like these crazy strong, efficient removal
Mm-hmm.
spells that, yeah, just blank the other more powerful cards. Like remember Pack Leader? Pack Leader was like one of these cards that just did
Yeah.
everything. It's a 2 mana 3/3. You can buff it. It draws
It's a 2-mana 3/3, man, in a mono color. It's like sorry, Watch Wolf,
oh
but get out of
man.
here. Like that's
Yeah, Watch Wolf, eat your heart out. Imagine a card just replaces itself, like doesn't even care. Like, oh, what a man. Cards are so different now. Like it's
yeah.
and it is the power creep, and man, it's not even it's not just the stats anymore, folks. It's literally like
No.
everything. The card just has like a paragraph stapled on it. And then there's other cards that even have a paragraph stapled on them, don't even do anything. So like it's really dependent on like what the maximum efficiency of the card is. It's just so funny. It's intriguing. I mean,
Mhm.
Magic's definitely come a long way, but like yeah, I mean yeah, you jump into like a game of standard and it's going to be like a 45-minute match because
Yeah.
um yeah, you're both doing like
It's
similar
mid-range grind.
things for a long time, and then
Mhm.
finally I got them. They got no cards, and I play my one card, and now, ooh, it makes two cards. So now I win because now I got two cards in my hand, and my opponent's just in top deck mode, and
Yep.
there's no creature lands, and yeah, everything just feels. It just all kind of. It's kind of gross, and yeah, all the cards do like three or four things, and ugh, ugh,
Yeah.
it's a weird feeling. It's a weird feeling. I don't
Yeah, it's funny. Like for a long time, it felt like aggro was like the thing in standard, and
know.
it's like, man, I just want to be able to play mid range. And then like I feel like the monkey paw just like curled one finger, and it's like, I got you. Like no, I want to be able to do any like I don't want to have to play mid range. Like I want to be able to play whatever. Yeah,
Oh, that's the
it's
problem
like
though.
I'd
Is that
like
when
to.
mid range is good,
Yeah,
apparently mid
like what?
range beats everything, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people are saying actually, a lot of people who are heavily invested in this standard format are saying that it's actually a really good, healthy standard format right now. And to some degree, I get it, and I can understand where they're coming from. Um, because yes, there is some variety. The Jund deck plays very different from the Mono Black deck, which plays very different from the Esper deck, which plays very different from the Grixis deck. However, at the end of the day, they all have black in common. Let's just acknowledge that because that gives you access to things like Infernal Grasp, Liliana, just some really powerful, and Shale Dread, of course, who does make appearances in all those decks, depending on whose list you're looking at. So you get access to all of those powerhouse pieces. But additionally, like 2 out of the 3 of those also give you access to Fable the Mirror Breaker. And if you don't think Fable of the Mirror Breaker is an automatic 4 of in both Jund and Grixis, I'm sorry to break it to you, but it just is.
Oh, did you say
Like,
automatic four of any deck with red? Because you're right, Ham.
yeah,
Any
exactly.
deck that
That's what I'm
plays
saying.
red is probably going to be one that card. If you're not playing the main deck, you know it's going
So,
to be in the sideboard as a four of because that card is
100%.
busted.
Oh, yeah.
It's
It's
going
the
to be
best.
next. It's on the watch list.
It's got to be.
It's on the watch.
There's no way. Wizards is willing to ban stuff in standard. They have proven that to us now. So, like, with every new standard, it's like, okay, it's a brand new day. Who knows? Like, maybe we're gonna be ban free for a while. Maybe they're gonna just like pull back on that. But nope, they are willing to drop the hammer in standard. Actually, going into this announcement, I was positive they weren't gonna do anything. I was positive. Well, we knew there was going to be.
I knew
We
Yoren was going to
heavily
be banned.
suspected there was an
I
announcement coming.
knew Yoren was going to be
But
banned. Like
yeah, you're unsure.
it was in
But
my
like, and
heart. I
also
just knew it. Like it had to
like
go.
the other thing that actually a lot of people were speculating on that I don't play this format myself, so I can't speak to it, but a lot of people were saying something from the Is It Delver list in Legacy was going to get hit as well. Like maybe
They don't care about
Murktide or
that
something
stuff.
like that.
They don't.
Um,
They don't care
but
about legacy or vintage. They don't. To them, those formats don't exist. They're like, they're like printing stickers into those formats. You think they care about legacy? They don't care. They're literally like straight up. They're literally like, here's some uncards in the legacy. Like, LOL. Here's Space Jace. They're like, the format's healthy. We've just infused a card that's in space into the
they
format. What do you mean?
yes, yeah, they literally did put Space Balerin and
Ah,
what is it, Cosmo, the dog. Like freaking Astro from the Jetsons is now legal in the Legacy. So yeah, exactly.
it just hurts Ham. I think.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't even know. Honestly,
Yeah.
I
But yeah, so it's
I
one of
don't
those
think they
things.
care. I
And
don't think they care about this
yeah,
formats. I really don't. I
I do
think
love
it's
all the
just
discourse on Twitter about it because in their note they did say like, oh, newer cards are impacting Legacy in cool, interesting ways, such as Leyline Binding, and apparently Leyline Binding is just not a thing in Legacy at all.
yeah,
Legacy
like
players, just,
all the comments
yeah,
on it were like, Wasteland said what?
right.
They're like, what? What do you mean? Like, what do you mean this card that you have to have like 2 dual lands out.
Yeah.
They're like, have you even played Legacy? Have you tried to have 2 dual lands out? You're like, this is probably not gonna happen.
Right.
It's pretty
Yeah.
rare.
So like, yeah, Leyline Binding is a powerful card, but like, no, it's
Yeah, like what? Like shut up. Like they're just
it's not
saying
working, dude.
literally just
Yeah, come
saying
off
dumb
it.
shit. Like shit that just doesn't
Yeah.
even it's
Well,
like irrelevant to like the actual format. Like and
yeah,
of course
and
Ragavan and all that other stuff was a problem because they're busted cards. Like
yeah, Ragavan, the card Ragavan is a problem. I don't have to be entrenched in those formats to like know any situation in which Ragavan shows up, unless you're at a 4-player 40 health pod, that card is going to be a problem, guaranteed. It just is.
that's gonna be the next card in Modern that gets banned.
Probably.
That or Saga. Those are my
I can see that.
next cards on the watch list. But that's where my power creep. I mean, you're right. Like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's newer cards into Legacy because the cards are so much more powerful. Like,
Mm-hmm.
one of your cards gets Force of Will, then you laugh because then the next card that you slam that does resolve does like 3 things. And in Legacy, you're just like, oh shit, this one card did 3 things. I lose.
Yep.
Because most people don't play removal. The removal's not like, yeah, removal's efficient, but most of the time, I don't know what it's like anymore, but I'm sure people finally started playing removal now. It's not 1998
Mm-hmm.
anymore, but like, even 2015, people weren't playing removal. Like, you know, people win the back off of like one card, but like, I don't know. It's a lot different. I definitely see why new cards make an impact in Legacy because they're so powerful. Like they just like a questing beast, Oko. All these cards are
Mm-hmm.
Uro, Omnath. I mean, all these cards do 3 or 4 different things. Like, of course they're gonna, you know, if you get to resolve them, if you build your deck to protect it so that it hits the battlefield, then you could even protect it to a certain degree from there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you have it for 1 turn, you probably win the game. I mean, that's just how Magic goes. Like nowadays, it's really weird. It never used to be like that. You know when I really felt like that, Ham. In all honesty, I know we always do some hot takes and talk pretty real on the
Absolutely.
podcast. For me personally, it was in Kaladesh block. Like,
Hmm.
something hit when I was playing vehicles and walking ballistas and all this other stuff, and something hit me, and me and my opponent were pretty much just top decking, but like the top decks are just crazy. Like each card just does so much crazy shit, and like that's when I realized like it was like such battle cruiser magic. It was such like, oh, I play my big dumb thing, and then oh, you play your big dumb thing, and we're both doing like big dumb things, and whoever does the biggest dumbest thing wins, and it's kind of like what it feels like. It stopped feeling, and there's nothing against good players either. Um, it's not feeling about being about the skill and more about how powerful the card that you're playing is. Like if you're
Mm.
able to resolve this super powerful card, then it kind of almost just takes over by itself, even if you don't make the most optimal decisions. Like Fable the Mirror Breaker is actually the best card as the example because the 2 cards that you're discarding are huge. Unless it's obviously like 2 lands you got to get rid of, which is why that card's really busted in that sense. But
Yeah.
you know what's not busted is sometimes you do have to discard cards that aren't the cards that are just obvious, and those are the make or break decisions that make the game. Those are the actual decisions in the game. But
Mm-hmm.
then there's times where the decisions don't matter, and you know you're kind of just playing like a sleepwalk magic. You know, you're like
Right.
Jesus, take the wheel, and you know he takes the wheel, and you know it's Fable flips, and there's no removal, and the game just ends, and it's like all right, sweet, we
Yeah.
did it. Like you know the game just played itself out. It didn't even matter what my opponent did.
Well, and I think
Right?
that's
Like,
part
isn't
of
that kind of like what
yeah.
it feels like sometimes? Like, it's weird. It's weird. Like, it doesn't feel like how obviously, like I said, I want to be like there's no skill in the game, but sometimes it feels like some of these cards are so powerful they just take over themselves, right? Rafine,
Yeah. Well, and you know,
like
you're right. Like,
I
and I
don't
think
know.
that's part of the issue. Part of the reason that the play experience of the mono black deck is so frustrating, because like if you're playing with the mono black deck, one, the deck is super obvious to build. Like it's very easy. You just take the
The
best
best black
cards,
cards, yeah,
best black cards, put them in a deck, add some swamps, some of the channel lands. You're done. It's not. It's very straightforward. Like I've even heard people genuinely say Wizards built that deck for us. Like no player came up with that.
yeah.
And
We
it's like,
talked about
well,
that the other day,
yeah.
in the other cast, which was like back in the day they would build like a tribal deck, like Merfolk or
Hmm.
Goblins, and now they're like,
Sure.
here's a mono black efficient mid range deck, and you're like, okay,
Yeah. It's like, oh, all right, I guess. Like it's just it's all pieces are just right there, and it's one of the, when you play it, and it appears to me like I understand sequencing can be a thing in any deck. Another thing, I'm hesitant to say that like any deck or any play pattern is brain dead, but at the end of the day with the black deck, it's like either like a lot of the time
How
it's
much
just like
mana?
okay,
It's like John back in the day. It's like, how much mana do I have? All right, I do
play
that.
that thing.
All right, I do
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Like, I have two
That's
mana. I play out my Tenacious Underdog. They either kill it or they don't. All right, cool.
uh,
Next turn, if they don't kill it, I tag with it. Then I play out my Graveyard Trespasser. They either kill it or they don't. If they don't, I tag with it. If they then turn 4, I'm gonna play out my Shell Tread. They either kill it or they don't. Then turn 5, regardless of what the board state is, I'm gonna hit Invoke Despair on them. It's like, and like, yeah, you have a question of like, okay, is it worth throwing my Graveyard Trespasser or my Liliana? But even that is like very simple if-then statement. If they threw a creature down, you throw Liliana. If they did
Yep.
not, you play the Graveyard Trespasser. Like it's not that not that crazy, you know?
it really reminds me of John. So one of our friends won Delaware State championship with
Oh yeah.
Bloodbraid Elf Jund in standard, right? So like,
Oh
and
nice. Okay,
all
yeah.
that my friends told him was, every turn, what we want you to do is you just count the amount of mana you have. You look in your hand, you tap out, and you just play that card. So then, so many games are him being like, he'd look and he'd be like, all right, yeah, tap. Okay, I got 4 Bloodbraid Elf. All right, well, obviously Bloodbraid Elf hits like lightning, and then now your opponent just automatically loses. And then it'd be the same thing. It's like, okay, well, I could play the Bloodbraid. It's like, no, just play the Bit Blast. Oh, they hit the Bloodbraid into the Blightning. Oh, they did it again. And it's like, that's kind of like what it feels like with this deck, where it's like, oh, of course you're like, oh, Sleeper Agent, Tenacious Underdog, Liliana. And you're like, okay, well, and then on turn 4, you're like, oh, now that both of my creatures are still alive, I can have mana to sink into the Sleeper Agent to
Exactly.
start
Yeah.
drawing cards. And then that's already playing by itself. And then my opponent is like struggling over here to find answers for like what I'm even doing. And yeah, it's kind of like, it really does feel like Battle Cruiser Magic, or like it feels like you're just playing the best stuff, and
Yeah. I mean,
there's no balance in the rest of the cards. It's just a straightforward like, this is the best stuff, and that's it.
yeah. I mean, honestly, like I do believe that a competent programmer could program an algorithm to play the mono black deck. And I don't feel like I've been confident about that since like Cavalcade of Calamity aggro. Like you could definitely teach, I mean, you could teach a dog how to run that deck. It was very straightforward. But like this one is I don't know, it feels like it very much on rails. Like it feels like Watsy kind of held
The
our
whole
hand
deck is
and just
Oko.
it's just all
Like
just do the thing.
the
Just do
whole
the
deck
thing.
is literally Oko. It's like, and
Pretty much.
I don't mean that as like, every card needs to be banned. Obviously, Oko is Oko by itself. But like, what I mean by that is that every card is like, yeah, 3 or 4 for 1. Every card is a must answer card, and then it creates these board states where both people are trying to do the same thing, and it's just kind of gross because it just ends up being like the person who ends up doing the last thing that gives them, like I said, like the extra card or the 2 extra things, and then it's just kind of boring, repetitive Magic, and we need some change, like, Mehook being
Yeah.
banned.
I hope it helps. I hope it helps,
kind of
but
means
I don't
aggro's
anticipate it
back.
making huge shifts. Like I
Yeah,
don't.
I
I
don't
think the
know.
biggest change is going to be when Brothers War hits. I'm really hoping that there are um, some good aggro
What do
options
you
there. I
mean?
mean,
Urz is gonna rule the day, Ham. Don't you worry. Like, we're gonna be, you and me are gonna be so wrong about how this,
I
13
hope,
mana
dude.
Planeswalker is.
I want to be. I so want to be wrong about that card. I want to be wrong about Urza so
I
bad.
swear, the first minute that my opponent resolves it, I'm just gonna be.
It's one of those
I'm gonna be
things.
so upset.
Straight up, honestly, if I am on, like, if I'm streaming and somebody melds that, I might just scoop out of respect. Like, you did it, you win. Like, good work.
I mean,
Um,
you probably lose. I mean, it's gonna be like an
probably actually I will because yeah, that
11 loyalty
planeswalker is insane.
Planeswalker or something.
Getting
Like,
to the planeswalker is great, but yeah,
I don't know. But
yeah.
yeah,
Anyway,
power creep is definitely like a different
Creep's a
thing
thing.
now. Like, Magic is so.
Yeah,
Yeah, it makes sense why
it's
there's
enough.
new cards in Modern, why there's new cards in Legacy. Like, it makes sense why these Horizon sets for Modern take over too, because the new cards are printed to be the new cards are like almost printed to be banned.
Almost.
Like, I feel like
Kind of feels that way.
there's no play testing, so then it's just like, all right, just run it out, and let's just hope that it works. And then, oh, if it works, it works. I mean, Fable really feels like that, where like even
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, a lot of us thought it wasn't going to be that good, and then the minute you play with it, you're like, this card's busted.
Yeah,
It's one of those
exactly.
cards
Like,
where it's like the
yes.
minute you play with it, you're like, yeah, never mind, this card's busted.
And oddly enough, actually, I felt the same way about like Uro and Croxa. Like when I first saw them, when I first saw them, I thought Croxa was going to be awesome. I really want to get my hands on Croxa, and I was like, Uro looks like he's going to be good, sure, but is it going to be amazing? Turns out, well, yes, but
I
like,
read Uro and I was so disappointed. I read Uro and I
yeah,
was like, is red even playable? Like
yeah,
Embercleave
yeah.
was in, so luckily red was playable, but
No,
like I
and
read
looking back
Uro
on it,
and
I
it
don't know
just
how that didn't jump off the page in me
it
as
just comes
being
back.
absurd.
It just
Because
comes
yeah,
back.
Uro's absurd.
Like it just that
No,
was my
Uro's
problem
dumb.
with the
I'm
card.
glad
It
that's
just
banned
it doesn't
everywhere
go
because that
away.
card's
It's
card's insane. Like, to be
oh,
honest,
that
I've
card
sat
is
down in a couple
necessary.
commander pods, and they're like, "Yeah, Uro's my commander." I was like,
It's like
"Do
I
I just
hate
get
you.
up and leave? Is that okay?" I'm like, no, let's play it out. But like,
It's like well, I'm gonna be exiling the shit out of your graveyard.
you're oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you think you're getting around commander attacks? Not on my watch. Yeah.
Yeah. Have fun with like a
Anyway, but
9
anyway,
mana
that's like,
fucking explore. Good luck with that.
yeah, it's cracked, man.
No, yeah, but that
Actually,
card was messed
that was
up.
something I found out. If you have Croxa as your commander, you can play Croxa on turn 2, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Put Croxa back in the command zone, and then play them back out on turn 4, then let them go to the graveyard. It's gross. People don't like it when you do that.
Yeah, you can
Just
get
throwing that
multiple
out there.
uses out of like all kinds of
Yeah. Any brawl
rare
players out there
abilities.
who wanna enjoy that tech? Yeah, definitely go for it. It's fun.
I
Yeah.
really like
Anyway.
that card when I'm playing it, but when someone else is playing it,
Mm-hmm.
it's a total nightmare. That card is like
Exactly. I
such
know.
a
Yeah, they're great.
card was such a
Yeah.
nightmare to play against. Like it
No, actually,
just
yeah, I love Croxa. Mostly though, I love Croxa not because it's just like the obvious 2-drop you just drop into a Rakdos Sacrifice deck. Because yes, obviously, but I love comboing with Croxa, and this is ultimately the kind of where I'm coming from. I identify very much as a Johnny combo player. I want to find weird synergies, and I want to be rewarded for finding synergies and combos within my cards. And right now, in almost every format of Magic, with the possible exception of Commander, that's basically just not a thing. Like, because you just play the best cards. That is how you win. Even if these 2 or 3 cards work really well together, if they are not standalone able to win you the game, their synergy means nothing to you. It just will not be enough no matter what. I feel like there was a time where that wasn't necessarily the case, where if you did find a particular combo or a particular synergy, you could take suboptimal pieces and create a competitive deck. I don't feel like that's a thing anymore at all, and I would love that to change. I don't know that it ever will in the rest of my lifetime. I don't know if this is just how Magic is now, but in
they
any
just keep
event,
pushing certain things. Like like we just went through. Is it summer?
mm-hmm,
Or is it year and a half or whatever? Even it's been like
right.
fucking forever, where every single format was like defined by expressive iteration.
Yep.
And now like we started to hit like the meat hooks and like the black mid-range decks essentially showing up, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's kind of like Rakdos decks, even specifically in my opinion, have kind of been slowly on the uptick, and that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of where we're at now. I mean, we originally saw
Yeah.
that with like the cat oven combo and all that stuff, and now we got to the point where we're banning black cards, and who knows, maybe
Right.
Fable's next, and that's another card that's another
Yeah.
Rakdos type strategy type card, and we just went through banning a bunch of stuff in Is It here over the last year and a half or whatever, and
Right.
I think they're just like they're having a hard time balancing like all the colors. If we can just get all the colors to be busted at once, then we won't really have a problem. I think they're
Yeah.
just
Sure.
pushing certain things too much sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Well,
whatever
and
ends
that's
up
the thing.
happening, they're not paying
Yeah.
attention when they're like, I just don't know how you wouldn't see it. Like I knew it. It was like Capenna and other stuff. I was like, man, I bet like they're really gonna push black. Like it kind
Mm-hmm.
of reminded me of like the Judgment Days, Odyssey block and all that, where
Yeah.
a lot of Odyssey was like black decks, and decks revolved around Cabal coffers, right? Because
Oh, sure.
that stuff was like the most powerful stuff to do, and like that's kind of like where we ended up being again, where like big X spells like Mehook Massacre pretty much ended up being the end game here. So I mean, I don't know, it's they got to find a way to have everything be good. Make
Mm-hmm.
all the colors be strong, cuz clearly they've shown that they can figure out how to make mid-range work, but they need to make it work for like all of it, right? And
Right.
everything kind of needs to have a face. I mean, there needs to be aggro, combo, mid-range control. I
Mm-hmm.
really think that there has to be some of those options, even if the combo decks are weak. Even if the combo decks are simply just reanimator decks. I think that's a combo deck.
Can be,
That's a
yeah.
combo strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's room for all this stuff, but I don't know. We'll see this does, and we'll see where Magic goes forward. I mean, there's just so much more powerful cards now. It's all I really want to get the point across, at least in this podcast today, is cards are a lot more powerful now. Um, Even board wipes have to be banned because
Right.
board wipes are kind of stopping strategies from existing. I mean, Farewell is going to be up there soon, right? Like,
Yeah.
no matter what you do, you can't escape when someone gets to 6 mana if they got double white,
Yep.
and you're not playing counter spells. You're probably screwed.
That actually, I had a fun moment on stream early this morning. I had just set up my arcane bombardment, my dumb nonsense that I was setting up, and my opponent hit me with a farewell. I was mid sentence. I had this big old smile on my face. I was talking with chat. The moment farewell hit, just boom, I deflated. And yeah, somebody even in chat comment is like, "Wow, dude, what just happened?" It's like farewell, man. What do you
It's like,
expect? Like it just completely it took the wind out of all my sails. I
it's
had
like, oh, by the
nothing
way,
left.
this card literally says no to everything that's
Yep.
happening in
Do
the
you
game
have
state.
do you have permanence? Stop it. Like it's
Oh, do you
absurd.
care about the graveyard? It's gone.
It's gone too. Exactly. It's
It's
all
gone.
gone. Everything you did, it's all gone.
Oh, that card is yeah, that card hurts. I think that's
It's
that's
bad.
that's gonna be the next it's
Hmm.
not gonna be banned, but this is the next card that everyone's gonna
No,
be really
yeah,
upset about.
I
It's
don't
the
think it's
Ujin. It's just Ujin.
yes. It's
It's
yes.
Ujin in a
It's
spell. That's all that it
hmm
really is. It's your
yeah.
underdogs aren't safe. None of your cards are safe from that card, really,
No.
except for planeswalkers.
Yeah, your planeswalkers are fine. Well, and so as a result, the answer to that is run more planeswalkers.
Wandering Emperor.
Yeah, Wandering Embers remains phenomenal.
Yeah, Wandering Emperor's
Yeah.
stock goes up.
Yep.
Yeah, I would
I think a
just
lot.
play
Yeah.
Just Guy. I mean, you could play Fable and Blue and
Hmm.
Wandering Emperor, and I think you're feeling pretty good, right?
Yeah,
Play some
that makes sense.
Krakens, some Leers.
Yeah,
Uh,
you can make that work.
Bring back some old school control. Maybe that'll be a deck
I mean,
again.
uh, we also have we have some incredibly powerful cards in the format that are legal still that a lot of people aren't talking about in standard just because they don't have the support pieces. Like
Hmm.
Hinata is still legal in standard.
What a
Greasefang,
card! What a card!
right? Like
Yeah, Grease
yeah,
Fang's
Hinata's
around.
fantastic, and Greasefang is still legal in standard. All it takes is one busted ass vehicle to show up with a crew cost of 4 or less, and Greasefang becomes meta
I
immediately.
mean, there's already
So
some decks that play Grease Fang,
yeah.
like the mech.
Hmm.
I forget what it's called. The one that Flame
Well,
Tongue
this
Caboose. It deals damage when it comes in.
oh, the Search Hacker
We
mech.
saw
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
this weekend.
Yep, I dig Search Hacker mech actually. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of cool cards. I mean, there's a lot of strategies. I think that I can also say this every time there's a ban. I think that there is some form of people not going out and brewing and finding more ways to beat it because there's an inherent
Hmm.
laziness in competitive play, which is just show up with the quote unquote easiest thing that gets you the win.
Yeah,
And whether or
that's
not
true.
people are competent with the deck, there's a wave of people showing up with mono black. There's a wave of people showing up with Rakdos. So it was
Hmm.
we talked about White Weenie before, where it's like, yeah, there's people that you automatically can just run them over, and you're like, man, they just copy and pasted that deck, and they have no idea how to play that deck. It's kind of interesting, but
Yeah.
um, that kind of ends up happening with competitive Magic, and to everybody out there, I mean, just try to be original sometimes. You try to add a little bit of originality, like try to not always fall into the meta. I think it's okay if you're trying to, if that's what you're trying to do. We actually 100% usually agree with that.
Hmm.
I have tons of videos where I'm just playing the best decks.
Oh yeah,
But I
I have
also
no
think
problem
in these
with people
circumstances,
playing meta decks.
there
No, I
should have been
don't.
ways to beat it. Like there should have been. There's so many cards in the format, Ham. How is there not a way to beat
Hmm.
this?
Yeah, exactly. That's the bottom line. I have zero problem with
Where's the all
anybody
spells
busting
deck?
out
Where's the all
any one of
spells deck
these.
that just kills
Yes.
everything, plays farewells,
Well,
and just wins off of enchantments or something? Where's that
like,
deck? How come that deck didn't exist?
yeah. I mean, we're in a situation where we have like Hollowed Haunting, we have the Jukai Naturalist. Generous Visitor, all still in the format, but for some reason, like, that deck doesn't really seem to be coalescing. I see some people out there trying it, and maybe with Meathook Gun, maybe that's, some of the early setup are small creatures. So maybe that becomes a thing now. Cool. Because I don't think that really had the legs. And we have like Zur Leyline Binding. It's very popular and it's very powerful. And I saw a lot of people playing that deck when it first dropped, and it seems to have kind of fallen out of favor. I don't know that this impacts that one way or the other, but all the same. Interesting. Like, there are a lot of those like fringe decks that like are just not there that maybe could get there. That I don't know. Like, I don't know what they need. They just need something. They just need a little bit more juice. Because like you're saying, like, actually one thing that occurred to me, in discourse around how you define the meta. In previous standards, I remember saying people would refer to tier 1 decks and tier 2 decks. I don't hear people just throwing around, yeah, that's a tier 2 deck. I don't hear that anymore. Because that idea of like, it's a deck that's good. Like, if you want to grind the ladder and maybe make it to Mythic, it'll get you there, but it's probably not going to win, the PizzaBox on Sunday. That's the difference between your tier 2, tier 1 decks. At least that's what it used to be. But now we've reached a point where there are like 5 or 6 tier 1 decks, a lot of which have a bunch of overlap, and that's the meta. And everything else is this weird jank that people are trying. Like, we're in a situation where Haughty Djinn, Talarian Terror, and Balmor all exist at the same time, and Electrostatic Infantry. Like, you mean to tell me that an Is It Spells deck can't exist in this format in some capacity? Really? Like, that seems shocking to me. We're also in a format with Haughty Djinn again and Delver of Secrets. Like, the namesake of Is It Delver in a Legacy is legal in Standard. Now, I know we're talking 2 very different formats, but at the end of the day, this thing has the power to be the game-winning finisher in a deck in a format where every single card printed in Magic's history is legal. Okay, with some exceptions, but most of them, the vast majority. That little 1-drop Jeff Goldblum has what it takes in Legacy, but it can't hold up in Standard? What? Like, I find that fascinating. And I'm not saying it must be tier 1 meta, but at the same time, the idea that no shell of any kind could hold up against the meta that we see, to even in a casual way. I'm looking for a tier 2. Seriously, I'm looking for a deck. When I talk about like the tier 2 decks, the fun decks, the viable but not amazing decks, what I'm looking for personally, so let me define that for everybody. I'm looking for a deck that I can load up, hop onto the ladder, chill in a platinum or diamond, play for, I don't know, handful of hours, play a dozen matches, win 5 or 6 of them, and have an okay night. If I win 7 or 8, we have some positive ladder progress, I'm happy. That's what I'm looking for. Honestly, I don't believe anything in the current Standard can consistently do that. When I try to build off meta decks in Standard, I get steamrolled no matter what I'm doing. Unless it's a strategy that is specifically built around any of these little 2-for-1, 3-for-1 cards that we've been talking about. A lot of times, if Fable's in the middle of it,
your deck, then your deck just has so much more of a higher chance of competing with everybody else.
And that's actually a problem that I found with a lot of jank brews. If you put the best cards in them, those cards will probably just win you the game, even if your deck didn't do the thing you designed it to do.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, it's like a weird
but it's true.
feeling, Like, it's no longer like, yeah, you have to play those cards like in your jank deck because you have to have a chance. Yeah, you have to have a chance, and then what they're doing is like kind of janky too, but it's just weird. We've definitely come to like a weird state of the game where I don't know, the cards are all just so powerful, and then there's just a big disparity between what's powerful and what's not, and then what's actually playable, and I don't know. We'll see what happens. I mean, like like you
Yeah.
said, like if they're already banning a card, then it means that they're not scared of banning anything in
No.
standard anymore. Once again, we're
Yeah.
back at it again. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's
No, but
just
I'll be shocked.
soft bans all the time.
Yep. I will be absolutely shocked if Fable of the Mirror Breaker survives its whole standard life cycle. To be honest, I would also be surprised if Invoke Despair does. However, I can imagine a world in which aggro strategies become strong enough, and a lot is going to have to change, and a lot of new cards are going to need to pull in this direction. I can imagine a world in which aggro strategies become strong enough that 5 drops become cumbersome
Yeah, it's gonna
and
be
Invoke
hard.
Despair is no longer viable. I can see that. I can imagine it. So if that shift occurs in the next few months, or at least we start moving in that direction, then we'll see Invoke Despair become less popular and as a result less problematic. That's my hope. We'll see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see. But yeah, we definitely got in a bunch of talk here about the bans and about power creep itself, which essentially is kind of like the idea, at least what I feel like behind both of these bans specifically.
Hmm.
Whether or not you agree with it, definitely let us know in the comment section down below. We do appreciate it making it this far into the video if you haven't already. Hit that subscribe, bell notification, like, and comment down below with your opinions on the bans and even just where you think Standard's going to be heading here in the next few weeks. That'd definitely be appreciated. You can also find links to me and Hamhawks content down below, same as the tournaments that we host. 3 a month, all are free to play with cash prizes. Hamhawks, any last words here for the viewers?
Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. These are always a delight to put on. Truth is, Hollywood and I, we get going, we start talking. So a long form podcast just seems to make sense. So thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. And yeah, you can find both of us. We're over on Twitch, do the things like as Hollywood said. Links are in the description. Yeah. So just thanks for having me, man. Always a pleasure.
Faux show, yeah, definitely get in on those tournaments. This weekend's gonna be standard. It's gonna be fresh. I mean, there's a ban,
Yeah.
so
It'll be
um,
interesting to see how it shakes out.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
gonna probably be a different meta than what we just had. I mean, that's kind of like
Actually, this is
interesting in
kind of
itself.
perfect because we had a tournament right before the ban announcement, and now we're gonna have one the week after. So I'm very intrigued
Almost
to
all of our
see how
standard
things
tournaments
change.
lately have been like completely fresh metagame. It's kind of weird. Like I haven't
Yeah,
seen that many fresh metagame standard tournaments like in a long time. It's definitely a thing, and you know what? There's not that much time to kind of test for it, so it's gonna be
yeah.
a lot of new decks and a lot of things I think people are gonna be trying out. So definitely be on the lookout for that and bring something spicy to the event. But definitely hope to see you. I hope that you all stay safe. See you next time and stay cheesy, everybody. Stay cheesy.